Hello everyone, I'm Annie Gibbins and you're listening to Memoirs of Successful Women, the podcast where you get to hear candid conversations with fascinating women from around the globe who share aspects of their business and life journey, how they measure their success and what they have learnt along the way. Hello and welcome to Memoirs of Successful Women. Today I'm delighted to introduce you to Ayumi Uyeda, who is the founder of Proppy. She's been a managing director of Blackmores Pharmaceuticals. She's had a whole history in the consumer health industry, pharmaceuticals. She's going to share with us today her journey to success and what she's currently doing. She loves the whole concept of startups and making things happen. And so welcome to the program, Ayumi.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Annie. I'm super excited to be here. Also, the first time I join a podcast, so that's a really exciting thing for me. So thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So a woman in your standing who's been a managing director of a massive company like Blackmores and then has now just gone and started up her own business as a founder. Let's start where you are now and then we'll go back into your journey of what's led you to where you are today. So first of all, let's tell the listeners all about Proppy. What is Proppy?
Okay, so Proppy, the name, and I put a lot of thought into the name actually. It's always fun coming up with a new name. But it's a shortening of the words property and pie, if you put those together. And so the aim was all about helping millennials get into property. So I think we're seeing a lot actually right now. The timing is interesting because there's a lot of talk right now about how unaffordable property is.
Yes.
And I felt like it was always unaffordable. I mean, the idea I actually had when I was about 21, I've been sitting on this idea for a long time. Don't want to give away my age too much, but it's well over 20 years. And it just really amazed me that it hadn't been done. So because the situation has gotten so much worse now, and I have stepkids who are adults, and they were struggling to get into property. So they're now 26 and 30, and we had to help them out, and they weren't going to sort of be able to get that leg up. And that's happening a lot more now. So I felt like we needed to introduce a stepping stone for millennials so that they could get into property. And so what Proppy is, it's all about owning a piece of the property pie. So you can go in with the creative team. It could be 2 people, it could be 3 people. It's an online platform. So in a few words, if I describe it, it is a mortgage sharing matchmaker platform. So you go on there, you create your profile, you decide how much your budget is, how much share you want to own. So it could be like 40 to 60%, there's a range. And then you decide whether you want to live in it or whether you're happy to be an investor. Mm-hmm. And we've put a little algorithm in there. It will match people up so that you can find people who complement your profile. And the best part, of course, is you choose the property you want to buy. So it's not like fractional property investment. You're actually buying, say, a half of a property that you really want to buy and one that you may have aspirations to wholly own later or not. You might just decide it's a good investment. But the idea is to really reduce the upfront costs so that you can get in. Because right now, I mean, if you want to buy like a $500,000 place, which, in the major cities, you don't get much for that. You've got to save well over 6 figures, probably somewhere around $120,000 to $140,000, depending on the state. It's really hard to do that. So this helps people sort of save half the amount, get in sooner. And what we're finding is, of course, the property prices are going up so much faster than wages. So getting in soon is really, really important. And I saw some numbers the other day that properties in Sydney, for example, are going up on average sort of between $1,000 and $1,200 a day. So if you think about that, like 1 or 2 months go by, there goes your first homeowner's grant, right? So there are all these trade-offs. So the aim there was to really just create a stepping stone for millennials. The reason I also wanted to really do this was that, we'll see as we get into it that I have a healthcare background, so it's quite a switch. But I really believe in the fundamentals of life. And the fundamentals are things like health, which I'm very passionate about as well.
Yeah.
You don't have anything if you don't have your health, but you also don't have anything if you don't have a roof over your head. And I strongly believe that if you don't have, and it does go beyond just the idea of shelter, and that's the basics part of it, but if you don't have a plan, and property is such a massive part of the Australian culture, if you don't feel like you're making inroads into owning property, because it's kind of an assumption that we all will for a lot of people, but we just don't know when that will happen. it's very hard to get the most out of your own potential. And, you know, if we all aspire to reach our potential, and I think we all do, we don't know what that is, and we have to sort of test that through life. But if you don't have those basics covered, health and shelter, it's very hard to drive your whole, whether it's your career, your potential, your passions, drive those forward. And so I see really strong links between those two. I also see, and I think we're seeing this through COVID now, is that if you don't have that housing part sorted, there is a real downward spiral when it comes to your mental well-being as well. And you start to get into these mental traps. And I just feel really strongly about helping people to sort of have the basics, but also be their best. And so that's kind of where it's all stemmed. And so I had this big itch that in all these years, over 20 years, I had not seen this done, and I needed to get out there and do it. So it was a massive leap for me to leave healthcare. And I don't think in my mind I'll ever leave, because I see the links here, but I've certainly had those, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, I'm probably not, those, oh, what am I doing?
Those oh fuck moments.
Oh yeah. Like, what am I doing? And I keep bringing myself back to, no, this is going to help so many people. So I've just got to give it a go, and I'm in a position now where I can. So we're going for it.
Love it. Go for it big time. And I know that feeling, because, you know, so many of the women that I've coached or been with, or even myself personally, when you have that thing of, but I really want to do this, it's been on my mind for years and years and years. And so it's that moment to just step into it rather than just lean into it. You're really stepping into it and stepping up and making it happen. And it is brave, and it is bold, and it is, you know, there's a cost, there's a cost when you leave a very significant income, a position, a whole world that people see you in a certain way and treat you in a certain way, to then become a founder again, and to actually, back your idea, concept, and to make it your own. So first of all, congratulations, because I just think that's absolutely awesome. And I totally do agree. You've just raised so many topics, and it's all swimming around my mind as a mum of 5 adult children between 21 and 30. That concept, particularly in Sydney, Australia, where we are, and when you actually look at how much properties cost, and it is, there's so many young adults, these millennials and Gen Zs now, who are actually going, oh my gosh, it's not even affordable. But it has been that interesting concept in Australia that it is the Australian dream, and I grew up with that. Like, the big thing in life is, to obviously be healthy and happy, but to actually own a property that's yours. Your home is your castle kind of concept. We've even got a movie about it, which is hilarious. So this concept, and my kids have done that same thing of, well, is it even realistic that you'd own your own property? So I actually think this is amazing. Your design of your company sounds like speed dating kind of, it's like a date for getting the whole package right. But there's so many aspects of that package, right? It's where the property is, that's right. If you want to live in it, you obviously both can't live in it if you're teaming up with someone. How many people do you partner with? Do you partner with people that you don't even, obviously know? What do you know about them? It sort of brings, from the older demographic of society, they'd be going, risk, concern, this and that, whatever. Whereas actually millennials are just going opportunity, to just give me an opportunity I didn't have before. That is life. There is a lot more uncertainty in this generation coming through. And also it's that's right. The concept that you can then, do that. I mean, we did that with a boat, for example. We shared a boat with 3 parties, because you kind of go, well, are you going to use it all the time, and is it opportunity and things like that? So I find this concept amazing. What have been your biggest challenges then, when you've got a passionate dream, you've always wanted to do it, and then you've now started up your own business? What has been the biggest challenges for you to do that? Was it also the practicalities?
There's both. There's definitely a lot of things that seemed like showstoppers along the way. So, like, if I just wind the clock back, so back when I was 21 or 22, right? And the funny thing is, I'm actually a very risk-averse person, and so I was the sort of person who would never have gone in even with a boyfriend to buy property. But when I was about 21 or 22, I rang around a bunch of these, these growth funds, your Macquarie's, your BTs, perpetuals. And I actually rang them and I said, look, I want to buy a quarter share of a property. Can you find some other people? Because I was looking at it from I need to get in, I need a legal framework. As long as we've got contracts, I'm okay to go in with strangers because we'll have the law to protect us if we set it up right. Yeah. But I wasn't prepared to go in emotionally. So I've always viewed property as a financial transaction, not an emotional one as such.
Right.
And that's just not the reality for most people. It's a very emotional purchase, right?
Yes.
And they all said to me, oh, no, we don't do that. And I'm like, yeah, no, I know you don't do that, but can't you find a couple of people? I'm sure there'd be other people like me. And they all just sort of said, no, you don't understand. We don't do that. We don't have a product. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't have a product? And they said, well, we don't sell that. And I said, yeah, but can't you just do it? I was so naive, right? I didn't realize that they have their portfolio of things they can sell, and anything outside of that is it's just not for sale, right? So it kind of never happened. So the way I saw it was, as long as you have a legal framework set up, and where you see these messy situations unfold with breakups in relationships and whatnot, is because they haven't had that upfront discussion and really contract put in place.
Yeah.
And it's really awkward. You're really going to say to your partner or your friend, we need to have a contract, subtext, I don't trust you, right?
It's like the prenup. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so it doesn't work out. But I am a really big believer in, and it's in business as well, right? You would never do business with someone without having the right contracts in place. And when you work for multinationals, it's without question. Exactly. It's okay, we're all happy, we all agree, you don't trust us, we don't trust you, we all have good intentions. We'll hope we never come back to the contract, and you almost never do, but it's just the smart way to operate. And so I really wanted to make sure we were applying that. So property does have that legal framework set and done. There's a base co-ownership agreement. We've done all of the steps required. We've partnered up with Australia's biggest conveyancing lawyers who are national, and we've done all those hard yards so we can say to our customers, here's a base contract you can use. If you want to tailor it, you can do that as well. But we wanted to just make it really easy so that became more the norm of, yes, let's all go in, eyes wide open, smart. And the other thing is very clear on how we're going to exit from the property. And this is what the interesting thing is about this. It's everyone doesn't have to sell together. You can just sell your share. So that's a major change. So when you want to exit, you'll be able to put your share of the property back up on the site and sell it to someone who wants to buy that portion. So we have not seen that in the market before. So, it wasn't the original intent to do that, but the feedback that we got when we were sort of doing our research and asking millennials what they wanted, that flexibility of exit was incredibly important. So we've built that in. So, it's quite a change to the mindset, but what I'm hoping is that we're doing is setting it up so it's in a very kind of not risk-free, nothing is risk-free, of course, but we manage the risk and people go in with their eyes wide open, knowing exactly what they're doing.
And I think that's one of the biggest points, and I'll definitely be sharing this with my kids as a concept. I think they'll love it because, one, millennials don't think forever. We did that. You buy a house and it's your house sort of forever or till you get old or whatever. And so, whereas that's right, a millennial mindset is very temporary. Things can change. I'm assuming it will, and those sorts of issues. Plus, I love that concept of you actually going in from a business perspective and just covering all bases, because that's right. Most of our, even these big decisions, relationships and housing, that often sort of comes next, come from that emotional, it'll all be wonderful. We'll just stay in the honeymoon phase. And as business women, we know exactly that point that you said, that, you have a contract before the worst scenario and you hope the worst scenario doesn't happen. But when it does, everyone then goes to the contract. And so many times in life, that's where the pain point is for everyone concerned, actually, that it wasn't actually put up front. So I actually love that concept that before you do anything, let's just make sure that it is all perfect, as perfect as it can be, so that it can, so you can just make wise choices. So this is very, very exciting. Wonderful. And so let's then backtrack a little bit. Then you were CEO or Managing Director of Blackmores Pharmaceuticals. So what was your journey? You still, look incredibly young, very capable young woman. So how did you end up having that role, and why was it important? You've mentioned a few times that you're all into health, and I know you're a runner and you love getting outdoors, so it really does suit, you know, who you are. And so what was it like, one, being in that industry, and also what changes did you make in that space?
Yeah, so look, it's funny. So Blackmores it is an amazing Australian company, right? It's an iconic company, and I had the absolute privilege of getting to know Marcus Blackmore, who's the founder. His father, Maurice Blackmore, he introduced naturopathy into Australia, and they fought a lot of the battles of trying to bring natural health to the forefront in Australia. So it's really funny when you look around the world, most cultures, whether it's through Asian cultures, Latin American, European, are very strongly grounded in natural health, so plant-derived treatment remedies, right? But the Australian culture is not, interestingly, and there's been a lot of opposition to that over the decades. And so Marcus and his father, Maurice, had to really fight a lot of those battles. And so it's been really interesting to see how they've transformed the industry. Now, of course, everything's changing. Natural health is on trend. Everybody's looking for natural solutions. They're moving away from drugs. So I was in pharmaceuticals before, and a lot of, as you go down in the younger sort of generations, you see the proportion of usage of natural products to, I'll call them drugs, but I mean medicines, right? I'm not talking illicit or anything. Medicines is really shifting in favour of natural solutions. And there's a lot of beliefs. There's whether it's new evidence that's coming out, but it's people are going back to their roots in so many ways. So I joined Blackmores because I felt that the purpose that Blackmores had and what Marcus Blackmore really truly believed in was so purposeful and had so much benefit to bring to people in their health. You know, there are so many people who have unsolved mysteries when it comes to their health. Yeah. And they end up resorting, it's interesting, they resort back to natural health solutions when there was probably a first line option. Now, having said that, you know, I'm very also pro medicines and pro what the pharmaceutical industry has done to advance medicine. I mean, without you wouldn't have penicillin, you wouldn't have, you know, a lot of these diseases that have been fixed along the way. And there's always controversy around the big bad pharmaceutical companies. But at the end of the day, it is, to me, the people who work in these companies, the difference that they can make. And you've got good and bad people everywhere. But what I will say is that medicine has been advanced in a really important way. You know, we should not be dying of heart attacks today. And people, unfortunately, still do. But we have so many solutions available to extend our lives, to improve our quality of life. And, you know, I made a decision very young, actually. I've always been a bit decisive, but when I was 14, I was highly inspired by this book I read called Strong Medicine by Arthur Haley. And it was actually all about a lady who started as a sales rep in a pharmaceutical company, and she worked her way up. But what was incredibly inspiring to me was the impact that she was able to make through her career. And that was something that stuck with me. With reading that book, I decided I was going to become a pharmacist, not to be a pharmacist, but to join the pharmaceutical industry. And that was my goal. So I pardon me. So I did that. I became a pharmacist. What I didn't expect along the way was that I loved being a pharmacist. And I worked in hospital pharmacy, and I worked at the Wesley Hospital up in Brisbane. Yeah. That was where I trained. And it was a big cardiovascular and oncology hospital. So I talked to a lot of cancer patients, a lot of cardiovascular patients who were going in for their bypass surgery. And it was just really interesting to me that you could spend 5 minutes with a patient and they were so incredibly grateful for that little bit of knowledge or extra information or reassurance that you gave them. And I was young, right? I was in my early 20s, and I never in my life thought that by spending such a tiny amount of time and really just sitting with them on the bed and saying, you're about to go in and have heart surgery, this is what it's going to mean, you're on 15 drugs right now, you're going to come out of that after that, and all you're going to need is aspirin and an antibiotic for a little while, and wow, you know, your life is going to change. And you could talk to them and tell them this, that you're going to have a whole new functioning heart, you're going to be healthier, and you're not going to be on 15 drugs when you come out of this. And it's going to be hard between now and then because it's quite a bit of trauma. But just that conversation, and they would say to me, my gosh, my doctor never told me that. And I'd say, well, I said, do you have other questions, right? And this was a very common conversation. I would ask them, do you have other questions? And they always had so many questions.
So many questions, yes.
And I would ask them, well, why haven't you asked your doctor? And they go, oh, no, I don't want to bother him, right? And I mean, it's a different generation of patients, but I realized very quickly that there was the opportunity to have a massive impact, positive impact on people, because people are terrified of what's going on. I mean, I can't imagine what it must be like to go in for cardiac bypass surgery and have all these unanswered questions, right? And so I loved working in hospital pharmacy, but I still had the goal to get into pharmaceuticals. And I felt that if I could work my way up, and I was ambitious. I will tell you, I was ambitious. I'm not one of those people who will say, oh, I never expected to get here or there. I was ambitious, right? And the reason I was ambitious was I felt that the further up I went, the greater the impact I could have on more people, which in a way is true. But what I didn't know at the time, and what I learned along the way, was that you can have a greater impact on more people, but you're much more removed from people. So having a one-on-one interaction with a patient where you can directly impact that patient is nothing like being in a senior position in a big corporate company where you're trying to then depend on so many people between you and the patient to have that impact. And it's incredibly difficult, very, very difficult. So you have to do things in very different ways. And so I still am a very big believer in inspiring people to achieve certain outcomes one-on-one. And what I mean by that is when I moved into my first general management role, and I worked for Bayer, which is a German company. So we had a lot of Germans, and there was a very senior German executive who said to me, right, as you move up, I have one piece of advice for you. I said, oh, okay, yep, I'm all ears. And he said, you will have to learn and switch from managing through people to managing through numbers. And at the time I thought, oh, that's really disappointing because I love managing through people, right? Like I felt like I could impact people one by one. And I'd only managed small teams at that point. Anyway, as my career progressed, I learned that advice, I've actually put it to the side. I don't agree with it at all. And of course, there's commercial aspects, but I'm a very big believer in business. If you do the right thing, the numbers will always follow. Yes. So I actually don't focus on the numbers. I still focus on the people around me. And whoever was in my sort of team, even though I couldn't necessarily reach, when you are running organizations of hundreds of people, or if you're in a global role, I was in a global role before Blackmores where, you need to sort of have reach into every sort of country. You can't impact every single person one by one. Okay. But what you can only attempt to do is impact those who you can reach. And so I still very much focused on that, and I didn't believe in managing through the numbers. The numbers for me were more of a metric, right, of the outcome. Just like in sports, right? You don't focus on the scoreboard, you focus on the ball. So, these are sort of the learnings along the way. I have absolutely loved working in healthcare. I've been lucky to love every job I've had. And people say to me, well, you're so lucky, you've always had such great jobs. And it's like, yeah, I am. Like, I've really loved every job and couldn't get enough of it. And every time I've moved from one job to the next, I always felt so sad because I felt like I had unfinished business always, right, that I didn't get to see things through because I am a finisher. But there's a lot of things I feel like I didn't get to see through, but you've got to sort of keep moving and go on to that next calling. I spent the last before I joined Blackmores, a good 10 years in different markets all through Southeast Asia and in Japan and then into the US. And also love that because I got the privilege of being able to see how healthcare systems worked in different parts of the country, how that worked with different cultures, different teams. And you have to sort of start to learn, I guess, what is tradition versus what is, that's how we've always done things, and know what to break and what not to break, right? What to protect and preserve. And I think that's been a real learning for me along the way. So you have the chance then to sort of really fine-tune your judgment as you go along. So it's been an amazing ride. I've just had the most incredible experiences thanks to these companies, honestly. Like these companies open up incredible chances for you to work with people. And I've worked with amazing people who you find around every corner. I've been absolutely blown away by the not just the caliber of like really smart people, but interesting people. And, you know, when you get to exchange ideas with people from a completely different country, you know, to sit in workshops with people from, you know, Russia or Belarus or, you know, and then all these international people who are also living in countries where it's not their own countries, like the Argentinian who's living in Barcelona, or you know, the German who's living in Ljubljana, or and it's just really amazing to be able to interact and work with people and share observations and share laughs and have a drink every now and again. That was in the days we were traveling, but all of that is incredibly rewarding, and you learn so much, and then you bring all of that back, right? So then I came back to Australia, joined Blackmores, and it was so fun and so refreshing to work in the Aussie culture again after so long. Like all the little, like you feel like you can dial the jokes up a notch because people
not so serious.
It's just, it's not, because, you know, Asia is very serious as a business culture, and you have to sort of adjust to that. But, you know, it's the nuances of the Aussie humour, right? I just absolutely love it. So I've really loved being back. And I have to say, it was really hard to leave Blackmores too, because I really love being there, and there's amazing people there. Again, I did feel like job unfinished, but the timing of what was happening in property and real estate, I
just had to go. You had to say,
yeah, I did. And you're also looking at your runway too, right? So you've got to give yourself time to be able to make an impact. So you can't leave things too late. So I kind of felt like I had to get on with it.
I absolutely love that. And the concept that, you know, when you say, you know, I had unfinished business, you actually should, right? Because if you're a high level thinker and work in that sort of space, there will be always things to do. There will be future pipelines, and so it is and should be always hard to leave, you know, because that's right, it's not as if we do a project and then we finish. We're always got things, you know, coming, and I think that is just so refreshing to say that you have loved all of your positions, because it's shown that they've been challenging and they've been right for you. But also when people say you're lucky, you know, it's amazing how lucky people are who really lean into their brilliance and their space of what they're wanting to do and are ambitious, and we as women particularly need to not shy away from that, you know, to actually say confidently, yeah, I was ambitious and I did make things happen and I did, you know, get those experiences and learn from those people, is a really good thing, you know, because the reality is it doesn't just happen, you know, it does require the people to actually go, yes, I am worthy of this. I'm going to make sure that I am educated, I get the right skill set, and I know the right people, the whole package that comes with opportunity. So I think that's great. I think it's fascinating too what you said about, you know, that divide when you become a senior executive, and I found this one a really hard learning curve as well of you know, that you then suddenly go into a different space which takes you further away from that core love. You know, I'm also a CEO of an eye health charity, and so I want to actually help people save sight, and you're there for those reasons, but then you're also then managing a company and dealing with that. And so it's that reality that you then have the power to have more influence, become an influencer and a change manager, and have the ability to implement incredible strategy and outcomes for people without, but you have to then give up those immediate deeper contacts. So I feel like you get that breadth, but you don't get that soul focus. You know, if it takes me back to those days when I started as a nurse, actually, and you go, that's right, you have those profound moments at someone's life, and I can picture that when you were at that person's cardiothoracic surgery, you know, it's like, yes, you know, you remember those moments because you do actually personally impact someone in an incredible way, really. And they'll remember you, you know, they'll come back and go, oh, there was this lovely pharmacist at this stage and I really needed it. It's incredible too in that, and I come across this a lot too, of the amount of people who don't ask questions to health professionals, you know, that particularly, I think there's a real divide in the, you know, 70 pluses, particularly in Australia, who just think if the doctor thought I needed to know it, he would have told me. And so they do have all of those questions. And that's actually a reminder for those listening in that always ask questions. If you've got questions, it doesn't matter if it's about your heart. We'll have it about their eyes. You'll have it in different sectors. Always ask questions, because that's absolutely how we learn. You've mentioned too culturally different, how different people are. Do you think a lot of that is as a change manager and an executive? Do you think it is mindset differences in different countries? Do you think it's a lot on just tradition, the way we've always done things? Is it a seniority thing that young execs want to change things, but they feel that they can't because older people are still in those positions, and so therefore they can't sort of assert themselves in those new ways? What have you picked up on that global difference culture?
Oh, gosh, it's all of the above, right? And very specific country by country. So it's interesting what you learn. I'll give maybe like Singapore as one example and Japan as another. And I think until you're in those countries, you don't see what the extremes are. But when you take an axis and you look at people who have individual mindsets versus a group mindset. When I say group mindset, it's like the village. Japan has very much a village culture where the whole is much more important than the individual.
Yes.
And Singapore has a very individualistic mindset. And I actually put them on complete opposite extremes. So the way that then manifests in the working culture is very different. And, when I worked in Singapore, I was there for 2 years, but I would say there was something that bugged me about Singapore for years after I left, because I felt like it was the one role where I couldn't get the team working where the sum of the parts was greater. Like in other markets, I had been able to, and most of the time you inherit teams, right? But I had been able to get those teams working in a way where we got disproportionate results because the glue got really sticky and we were able to all run in the same direction and leverage all the strengths.
Absolutely.
And that's all finding the right chemistry and the balance in the team. And I think one of the critical pieces of success for any team is building memories together. And, you get a lot of scrutiny when you work in publicly listed companies for doing certain things. But I always look for what are those things we can do together that whether it's, in Japan, we climbed Mount Fuji together, which is, you do that through the night and you're really tired and it's really cold and it's really hard and you do it together. Or, and in New Zealand, we had the chance to swim with dolphins together, right? In the freezing cold water, and we had to share the warm hose around and hot water down each other's backs. But if you can build those memories together, you build this incredible dynamic in business. But in Singapore, I felt like I never got there. I just couldn't get that team working together. And I had the chance there to recruit a number of people, and I recruited really smart people, what I would call A talent. But I think the mistake I made was each of those people had a very individualistic mindset where the team wasn't greater. And so we never actually got that effect. Japan on the other side is a culture where it is a village mindset. The team and the dynamic and the community is always far greater than the individual. It's a very humble culture, and that goes deep. And a lot of they call it Japanese logic, but when you're working in business in Japan, it is very difficult to succeed. A lot of Western companies, multinationals, it's the same story. They go there, they fail, they go home. They just cannot succeed there because they fundamentally do not understand the culture and the business culture. And there are deep-seated traditions that you have to try to understand, which drive the decision-making for today. And you need to be able to get in there and understand what can be challenged and what should not be challenged. And it's not logical at all. There is no logic in Western logic, right? There's no logic to it. So that understanding of deep-seated tradition is critically important in certain cultures like Japan. And I'm sure there are other cultures like that too, all through Europe. So I think it's important what it means though is it's very time-consuming to understand that.
Yes.
You have to have the conversations, you have to have the trust, you've got to dig in deep and really understand why people are saying certain things in certain meetings or things aren't going in the right direction. And again, the tricky part with Japan is it's not a direct, let's call it, the language is a high context language, which means everything is all read between the lines. So even if you ask those questions, you won't get the answers. You still have to find what's between the lines. And so it does require a lot of patience, and it requires a lot of intuition, and it requires time to get in there and understand. So I think that's probably true for everywhere that you go. If you don't know the culture, you just you have to really get in there and understand it. And, you know, when I worked at Bayer, they had this really amazing tool. It was an online tool where you could actually go in that helped you settle into different countries by understanding where your natural preferences set versus the norm of the culture in that destination country. So you got an automatic kind of read on what your personal watch outs might be that you might have to think about. So I thought that was incredibly useful, and a lot of the people who moved around different countries use that tool as well. But then you've also got to just get in there and play it by ear. But I have to say, I feel for people who in this last couple of years have taken jobs overseas but not moved there. Like, I know people who have now taken a job in Japan but they're not in Japan, or taken a job in Hong Kong and they're not in Hong Kong.
So hard.
I think that's very challenging and very, you know, very hard to be able to get in there and understand that. So that's got to be really tough for them, I think.
I think very, very difficult. And yeah, that's true. I love you know, I'm always chasing to create synergy, which is what you're saying. The sum of the parts is bigger than what you're trying to do. And that all does come from relationships and shared experiences, and really, you know, just allows you to punch above your weight. And so, but there's so many factors, as you said, that actually are required to make that happen. And that's the dream, isn't it, when you actually get that in different places. And so there's pros and cons, and I've seen that in different countries as well, that you know, that's right, you love that, the all buy in, that Japan culture, but then you also don't get you know, it's to go to that next level up is also the innovators, the risk takers, the, you know, the Elon Musk, the Richard Branson type, or you know, the Ayumi type, who go, you know what, I'm just going to back myself and do that. So, you know, I think it's all a journey, and there's all different elements that we like about different sort of contexts, and it's probably the perfect blend, I think, is when you actually, you create that synergy, but you also have an environment that allows, you know, innovation and excellence and ideas to be tested with the risk of failure, you know, and being okay with that, and which takes us onto a whole other conversation.
Oh, yeah.
So in your career journey, who has most inspired you?
Look, I've had some amazing managers. There was one who was a French guy in Bayer, and he came from outside of the healthcare industry. So he came from the crop science division, came in. I found his name is Bruno Tremblay. He was incredibly inspirational. He was such a visionary. And what I loved about him was, and he was the one who sent me into Japan, which, you know, initially I'm half Japanese, right? So I have had a baseline understanding of the culture. And that's not why they sent me there. But initially my reaction when he said, why aren't we in Japan? And I said, well, yeah, it's a big opportunity. And he said, do you want to go? And I said, no, absolutely not. It's a very male culture. I'm never going to succeed there. I'm not Japanese. I'm half, but they won't view me as Japanese. And he just sort of said, well, why not? But anyway, I ended up going because I had complete 100% trust that he was going to back me, and that he understood that it was going to be really, really tough and really, really hard, which it was. But what I loved about him was he was the kind of boss that when he came to visit the country, we loved it. We loved it when he came, right? And the reason was that when things were hard and we weren't getting that initial traction, because it does take a good 2 years to show commitment in the market before anyone's going to buy from you. You just have to do that time, right? He wasn't there saying, why aren't you selling more? He was there saying, what about this? Or have you thought about that? Or he was such a visionary with his lateral thinking, and you know, it wasn't necessarily things that we should do or that we even did, but he pushed our thinking broader and put air under our wings for us to find new ways to fly, right? And so he was an incredible inspiration for me, and I learned so much from his style there. And you know, it is really about putting air under people's wings so that they can leverage their strengths and just go and have that implicit two-way trust, which is actually very rare to find. So he was an amazing inspiration for me, I will say, in probably the last 10 years. Another person who was a really big inspiration, actually, she was messaging me this morning, and she's the one that actually got me into running, and I worked with her in the US. And she is an Ironman or Iron Woman, and she went to the World Championships in Kona. But what's inspiring about her is when she did her first Ironman race, 6 weeks later, she was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh.
It's like, oh my gosh, you did an Ironman with cancer? And then she went on to do more, and then, and she, had surgery, and she's all good and all okay. But she's continued to go on, and she was the one that actually said to me, why don't you do a marathon? And I was just, no, not with these knees. I ruined these knees in my 20s because I thought I was a runner, but I actually wasn't. And she said, you don't have a joint problem. You have a strength problem. Mm-hmm. And I was like, really? And I asked her to write me a plan. I said, will you write me a running plan? So she did. So I stuck to it and I did it. And then I did my first marathon last year, and then I did another one a couple of weeks ago. And I've kept it going. But she, I would say, is one of the most intense and smart people I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And I learned so much from her. I only worked with her for a year, but I learned so much from her. And the reason, it wasn't just that story that was inspiring, but for me, it was this relentless kind of problem solving, finding new ways, and the speed at which she worked. She was absolutely phenomenal. So she's been in recent years a real inspiration, and I will say she's changed my life because now I run.
Now you're running everywhere with those strong knees.
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations on your marathons. That's very, very impressive. And it also is wonderful to push yourself into something. I love it when you turn an I can't to you suddenly I can. And that's just mindset, or those people, that's right, who just suddenly go, well, that's right, you find a way that you can do it. Right? Yeah. And that's what you're saying about that.
Yeah.
Even though the circumstances look really bad, like knees or breast cancer or something really challenging, you just go, well, how can I make it a positive?
Oh my gosh, and it is pure mindset. I can't tell you. I mean, people probably hear this and just say, oh yeah, okay, she ran a marathon, she's probably good at sports. No. You should know, in primary school, I had the nickname face planter. I was the one that got picked last on every team, and when they were forced to pick me, they would all roll their eyes. I still am the most uncoordinated person. I don't find the rhythm easily. Like it's when it comes to anything sports or athletic, I do not have it. So to kind of set this goal to run a marathon for me was so ridiculous. I can't tell you. I didn't know if I could do it. And I started to tell myself, if I have to walk, I can walk. And then I heard, oh, there's a time limit. You have to finish it in under 6.5 hours. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't walk and I'm going to have to run. So you sort of go through all of this, and then you get through the training and you just keep going at it. And I can tell you, if it's possible for me, it is possible for anybody, because I am really uncoordinated and slow. I'm slow.
But you get there in the end, and that's the main thing. And I tell you what, when you run through that finishing line and the ribbon, you're like going, oh my gosh, it was all worth it, because it's triumphant. It's that's right. It's choosing something to go, I'm not naturally the best at it. I'm not naturally, I even doubted myself. I even had a plan B, backup plan of at least I could walk it or whatever. And when you actually do it, it does take you to that next level of confidence, whatever it is. It might, for those listening in, it may be a marathon, and maybe not. It might be maybe that choice to have a startup. It might be that choice to go for that promotion. It might be that choice to choose yourself and your own empowerment over someone else's dominance over you. There's so many different ways that you can apply that same sort of concept to actually just go, just lean in and do it for the sake of it, to test yourself, right?
Yeah.
Amazing.
I think that's the thing with testing yourself. Your limits are far further than what you think. Just go for it. Just do it.
Well, it's because we put the limits on. There are no limits. We self-limit constantly. Society self-limits. So we do it, society does it. So when you actually go and realize that very concept and actually go, what if there are no limits? Then all of incredible things are possible,
I have this little voice in my head. It's my grandma. She's, passed away many years ago. But she always used to say, you go for it. And I have that little voice always there. You go for it.
You go, girl. I love it. I love your grandma. I had one of those too. Actually, I had two of them. They were like, yeah, you do it. I'm like, oh, yes, I love that. Oh, wow. Well, our time has just gone so fast. Let's finish by, so what does success mean to you? This podcast is called Memoirs of Successful Women, and you are a successful woman, but what do you define as success?
Oh, that's such a big question. And I would say that has changed over my life, right? I grew up thinking success was about making money. I'll admit it. I did. I thought the more money you made, the more successful you would be. That's clearly not the case. I think it's about, I do think it's coming back to that earlier point. It's about achieving what you thought you couldn't do. And, for you, it's going to be whatever's important to you. And it can be helping one person. It could be saving up and buying that one thing that you always wanted. It could be for some people, achieving a very happy, stable family is a major goal, depending on what their background was, right? So I'm a really big believer in having goals. I think life is so much better when you've got goals and you start to get near them. So I would say success is actually having a direction and a purpose and having a go to get there. It doesn't even mean you have to achieve it. Just give it a go and try. Fantastic. And I think if you can do that, then you've already pushed yourself further than you would have otherwise been, and that you should be really proud of.
Super proud. Beautifully said. So let's finish there. How do people find you? What's your website for property?
So it's proppy.com.au. So proppy spelled as in property pie, PROPPIE. .com.au. So we're there. We're on Instagram as well, proppy_Australia. We're on Facebook. We're everywhere on all the social media. I'm on LinkedIn as well. And I'm always happy to talk to anyone about anything if they have any questions about property or, feel free to reach out.
That's it. Well, I will be putting all of your details on my podcast platform and my YouTube channel. So don't worry if you missed out anyone. You can definitely find those. Reach out to Ayumi. I think her concept of property is amazing. It's definitely the future. It's a way of making things happen. And that's what this is all about. It's actually saying, you can get limited by, that's right, your immediate finances, your situation. But this is a way to actually make things happen, that you could partner with one, two, many people. There's always a way, and this definitely gives you potential for that financial freedom. That's what you're actually chasing, which is very empowering, which is obviously very important for our own health and wellness ultimately. And just that independence, which we all crave deep down. So thank you so much for being on my program today. I wish you all the best in your future success.
Oh, thank you, Annie. It's been a blast. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Memoirs of Successful Women. You can find me at anniegibbins.com, where you can download my free resources, get connected on social, and check out my online magic transformation program. If you love this show, feel free to subscribe to future episodes and, of course, share it with your friends. I'll see you again soon, and until then, happy podcasting.